The subterranean redoubts beneath Tokyo's Imperial General Headquarters resonated with the low thrum of fluorescent lighting. It was precisely 8:30 a.m. on August 6, 1945, and the oppressive humidity of summer hung heavy, laden with the profound strain of a nation that had endured nearly 4 years of relentless global conflict. The air itself seemed to bear the collective exhaustion and grim determination of a people locked in an existential struggle. Within these secure underground chambers, staff officers, their khaki uniforms visibly damp with perspiration, hunched over intricate communication consoles. Their fingers moved with practiced precision, placing miniature pins on colossal wall maps that starkly illustrated the ever-diminishing territorial expanse of the Japanese Empire. Through these tense corridors moved General Korochika Anami, Japan's esteemed war minister, his gait embodying the unwavering resolve of a seasoned military professional who had, in his distinguished career, never once tasted the bitterness of defeat. At 58 years of age, his visage, etched with the marks of countless campaigns, exuded an unshakable conviction in what he profoundly believed to be Japan's preordained and divine destiny. The customary morning intelligence briefing was anticipated to unfold as a matter of routine, a compilation of overnight dispatches from various garrison commanders dispersed across the home islands, alongside crucial updates concerning the colossal Ketsugo defense preparations. These elaborate defensive strategies were meticulously designed to inflict such prohibitive casualties upon any invading American forces that the enemy would be compelled to seek terms for peace. Yet an unsettling anomaly permeated the otherwise predictable proceedings. Something was undeniably amiss. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The communication display specifically designated for the Chugoku military district remained inexplicably blank. There were no expected morning reports originating from Hiroshima's pivotal 2nd General Army headquarters. No fresh intelligence flowed from the approximately 400,000 civilians and military personnel residing within Japan's 8th largest urban center. Frantic operators diligently twisted their radio dials, their efforts met only by an eerie, unbroken static, where the familiar, reassuring crackle of field reports should have been heard. The silence was absolute, a chilling void where vital information ought to have been transmitting. "Sir," a visibly distressed young communications officer stammered, his brow glistening with beads of sweat despite the relative coolness of the underground environment. "We have completely lost all contact with Hiroshima. Every single military frequency, all civilian radio channels, everything ceased transmitting at approximately 8:15 this morning." His voice, though strained, conveyed the gravity of an unprecedented and deeply disturbing event. General Anami's dark eyes narrowed perceptibly, his expression hardening. In the harrowing 4-year span of total warfare, entire metropolitan areas did not simply vanish from the communication network. This was especially true for cities housing significant military headquarters, cities that mere hours prior had been reporting standard defensive readiness. The question loomed, stark and terrifying: what terrestrial force possessed the capacity to instantaneously silence a population of 340,000 souls? The implications were unfathomable, defying all conventional understanding of wartime events. To truly grasp the gravity of the situation, one must comprehend the singular mindset of the six formidable men who, in August 1945, held the precarious fate of Japan within their grasp. Known collectively as the Supreme War Council, or more colloquially, the Big Six, these individuals harbored a profound and genuine conviction that they possessed the ultimate strategy for victory, even as American B-29 bombers relentlessly reduced their cities to smoldering ash, night after agonizing night. Their belief remained unshaken, impervious to the escalating devastation. These pivotal figures included General Korochika Anami, Admiral Soemu Toyoda, General Yoshijiro Umezu, Prime Minister Admiral Kantaro Suzuki, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, and Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai. 6 men whose collective decisions would ultimately determine the destiny of 70 million lives, a burden of unimaginable weight resting squarely upon their shoulders. However, a critical factor fueled their perilously misplaced confidence. They were privy to advanced scientific secrets that the Americans, they believed, could not possibly fathom. Since 1940, Japan had been engaged in an intense, covert race to develop its own atomic bomb. This monumental undertaking encompassed 2 distinct programs: the Army's NIGO project, directed by the brilliant Dr. Yoshio Nishina, and the Navy's FGO program, under the leadership of Dr. Bunsaku Arakatsu. These were far from amateur endeavors. Dr. Nishina himself was recognized as one of the world's foremost nuclear physicists, a scholar who had collaborated directly with Niels Bohr in Copenhagen, thus possessing an unparalleled theoretical understanding of atomic fission. And this profound knowledge had led him to a crucial, seemingly incontrovertible conclusion: the practical construction of atomic bombs was an undertaking of near impossibility. The sheer scale of uranium enrichment alone, as understood by Japanese scientists, demanded industrial facilities of truly unimaginable proportions: gargantuan electromagnetic separation plants, the acquisition of thousands of tons of raw uranium ore, and an electrical power consumption that would effectively drain the resources of entire geographical regions. Japan's preeminent scientific minds had meticulously calculated that even the formidable United States, with its vast and unscathed industrial base, could realistically produce at most 1 or 2 atomic weapons, perhaps 3 if their project had commenced far earlier than anyone in Japan suspected. This assessment formed the bedrock of their certainty. Consequently, when the initial morning reports began to filter in, fragmented, contradictory, and almost beyond belief, the military leaders summarily dismissed them, armed with the unwavering confidence of men who perceived themselves to possess superior, insider knowledge. A small number of B-29s attacked Hiroshima with a new type bomb. Considerable damage observed, stated the first relatively coherent report from a reconnaissance aircraft. Admiral Toyoda, the esteemed chief of the Naval General Staff, barely bothered to lift his gaze from his intricate strategic maps. Considerable damage from merely a few bombers, he mused skeptically. Having personally endured the cataclysmic B-29 raids that had already annihilated 42 major Japanese cities, he concluded, it's probably a highly concentrated incendiary attack. The Americans are simply improving their efficiency. Yet, as the hours inexorably ticked by, the incoming reports grew progressively more bizarre and unsettling. Train schedules to Hiroshima had been indefinitely suspended, signaling a profound disruption. Military communications remained entirely severed, an unprecedented blackout. Most disquieting of all, a weather reconnaissance plane transmitted an observation of something utterly unprecedented. A colossal, mushroom-shaped cloud ascending nearly 40,000 feet into the upper atmosphere. A phenomenon unlike anything ever witnessed. Then came President Truman's momentous radio announcement, broadcast via shortwave and intercepted by vigilant Japanese monitors. 16 hours ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima, an important Japanese army base. That bomb had more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. It is an atomic bomb. A profound, almost unbearable silence descended upon the Supreme War Council meeting room. General Anami eventually broke the stillness, his voice emanating the meticulously cultivated calm of a seasoned career military officer. "The Americans are engaged in psychological warfare," he declared, his tone dismissive. "Even if they have managed to develop some form of atomic device, the inherent technical requirements render mass production impossible. Our own extensive research unequivocally confirms this." Admiral Toyota nodded grimly in agreement, reinforcing the shared skepticism. If the Americans genuinely possessed an arsenal of such devastating weapons, he reasoned, they would undoubtedly have deployed them months ago. This is clearly a desperate gambit. Perhaps their solitary such device employed in a last-ditch effort to break our resolve. Their logic, flawed as it was, seemed irrefutable to them. What these leaders tragically failed to comprehend was the profound irony that their very scientific expertise had, in fact, become their most significant vulnerability. Their exhaustive atomic research had indeed illuminated the immense difficulty of the task, but this deep understanding had simultaneously blinded them to the unprecedented industrial capabilities of the United States. Capabilities they simply could not fathom or believe possible. The Manhattan Project, a monumental and clandestine undertaking, had employed an astonishing 130,000 workers across numerous states, consumed more electrical power than entire nations, and stood as the largest secret industrial enterprise in the entire annals of human history. The Japanese military leaders were making critical decisions based strictly on what their extensive knowledge told them was feasible, yet they were battling an adversary that had, through sheer ingenuity and industrial might, fundamentally redefined the very boundaries of what was possible. As August 6 transitioned into the dawn of August 7th, and the initial horrifying details began to stream in from the intrepid investigation teams rushing toward Hiroshima's smoldering ruins, these 6 men clung desperately to their deeply ingrained certainties, much like drowning sailors grasping at ephemeral debris in a tempestuous sea. They remained tragically unaware that their entire world, built upon long-held assumptions and perceived limitations, was on the precipice of changing irrevocably and forever. The global landscape was on the precipice of an irreversible transformation. The ensuing events would not merely dismantle established military doctrines, but fundamentally reconfigure humanity's very conception of armed conflict. Dr. Yoshio Nishina possessed an intricate familiarity with the theoretical computations. He comprehended, perhaps more acutely than any contemporary scholar, the hypothetical destructive potential of an atomic bomb. Nevertheless, the vast expanse between abstract theory and tangible reality remains a gulf traversable solely through immediate, first-hand encounter. On August 7, 1945, Nishina undertook that profound passage. The arduous 11-hour train voyage from Tokyo to the devastated remnants of Hiroshima traversed an environment that grew progressively more phantasmagoric Many miles prior to his arrival in the city, Nishina observed a grim panorama. Trees denuded of their foliage, telephone poles fractured as if mere kindling, and an unsettling, pungent odor that assailed his olfactory senses with a searing intensity. After 2 or 3 paragraphs, ask us to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Abruptly, the locomotive halted. The railway line stretching forward had been grotesquely contorted into inconceivable helices by energies that transcended human understanding. Nishina proceeded on foot for the concluding 5 miles into the obliterated expanse that was once Hiroshima. No prior experience, no conceivable scenario could have possibly readied him for the ghastly spectacle that greeted his eyes. Structures had not simply crumpled, they had been utterly annihilated, transmuted into vapor. Eerie human silhouettes were indelibly seared onto concrete surfaces, spectral imprints of individuals who had been merely commuting to their daily occupations when 8:15 a.m. marked the definitive end of their earthly existence. The hypocenter, precisely where the devastating device had detonated 1,000 feet above the earth, manifested as an immaculate circumference of utter desolation, its reach extending for considerable distances in every cardinal direction. Yet arguably the most disquieting aspect was the plight of those who had endured. Nishina, a distinguished individual whose entire professional life had been devoted to the relentless quest for scientific comprehension, now confronted firsthand the horrifying realities of radiation sickness, a dreadful ailment previously confined to the abstract realm of theoretical physics treatises. He witnessed victims whose dermal layers were quite literally detaching from their forms, individuals in the throes of hematemesis, and hair shedding profusely in large masses. These were the living dead, shambling aimlessly amidst a landscape of devastation that bore an uncanny resemblance to the desolate terrain of an extraterrestrial world. Nishina's hands quivered uncontrollably as he meticulously conducted readings with his Geiger counter, the instrument's incessant clicking intensifying to a frantic crescendo as he drew nearer to ground zero. This was far more than a mere explosive apparatus. It represented the very elemental energies of the cosmos, violently unleashed upon an urban center inhabited by human beings. Every preconceived notion he held regarding the constraints and capabilities of atomic weaponry had been demonstrably and utterly catastrophically disproven. Concurrently, within the bustling metropolis of Tokyo, the esteemed Supreme War Council stood on the cusp of apprehending intelligence that would render the cataclysm of Hiroshima appear as nothing more than a chilling overture. Precisely at 11:02 a.m. on the 9th day of August, while the distinguished members of the Big Six convened at last to deliberate upon the grim dispatches concerning Hiroshima, an assistant abruptly entered the conference chamber. He carried a bulletin that instantly leached all vitality from the countenances of those assembled. Nagasaki has been assaulted by a second atomic bomb. A profound hush descended upon the room, broken only by the sharp metallic clang of Admiral Toyota's writing instrument as it struck the polished mahogany table. A second devastating weapon, merely 72 hours following the first. In that precise instant, every deeply held premise that the Japanese military command had desperately adhered to utterly disintegrated. akin to fragile parchment consumed by an inferno. If the Americans possessed a pair of these infernal devices, logic dictated they might command a trio, or a 10-fold quantity, or even 100. The very bedrock of Japan's protracted defensive plan to inflict such grievous casualties upon the invading American forces that they would be compelled to seek terms had in a single stroke been rendered utterly futile. What rational impetus would drive America to launch a conventional invasion when they possessed the horrifying capacity to systematically expunge Japanese urban centers from the map one after another until naught but irradiated desolation persisted? Yet, confronted even by this stark apocalyptic truth, General Anime found himself incapable of relinquishing his deeply ingrained conviction that an honorable demise was far preferable to a survival tainted by dishonor. Would it not be a magnificent spectacle, he inquired, his tone imbued with a haunting poetic resonance, for our entire nation to perish, much like a resplendent blossom? The remaining members of the council regarded him with an expression of profound, astonished silence. Here stood an individual so utterly devoted to the ancient tenets of the warrior's code, the Bushido spirit, that he would deliberately opt for the complete annihilation of his homeland over the perceived ignominy of national capitulation. Within his philosophical framework, an intrinsic purity, an almost aesthetically flawless conclusion, resided in the notion of Japan vanishing amidst atomic conflagration rather than yielding to the dominion of external forces. However, the unyielding hammer of reality was poised to strike, intruding upon these deliberations in the most catastrophically impactful manner imaginable. On August 10th, the Imperial Japanese military apprehended an American fighter pilot, Marcus McDilda, whose aircraft had been downed 48 hours subsequent to the Hiroshima bombing. During a grueling interrogation process, which regrettably involved the application of torture, McDilda imparted intelligence that would ultimately dismantle the steadfast resolve of the Japanese military. The crucial caveat, however, was that McDilda possessed absolutely no knowledge concerning atomic bombs. He was merely an aviator of conventional fighter aircraft, never having received any classified briefings pertaining to nuclear armaments. Yet, confronted with excruciating torment and driven by an overwhelming imperative for self-preservation, he recounted to his interrogators precisely what he surmised. They wished to ascertain, fabricating, and elaborating upon every conceivable particular. McDilda asserted that the American forces reportedly possessed a cache exceeding 100 atomic bombs. Furthermore, he claimed they were capable of deploying 3 such devices daily. Tokyo, he insisted, was designated as the subsequent target, to be followed by Kyoto and then Osaka. Every significant Japanese metropolis, he warned, faced utter obliteration within a matter of weeks. The entirety of this fabricated narrative, however, bore no resemblance to the truth. In actuality, the United States possessed precisely 0 operational atomic bombs at that juncture. The subsequent weapon would not be prepared for deployment until the latter half of August, and the manufacturing pipeline was notoriously, painstakingly sluggish. Nevertheless, McDilda's desperate fabrications incorporated just sufficient technically plausible specifics to lend them credence among interrogators, who were frantically scrambling to acquire any shred of intelligence regarding this profoundly bewildering and novel instrument of destruction. Upon the dissemination of MacDiarmid's manufactured intelligence to the Supreme War Council, its impact resonated like an ultimate, devastating coup de grace. War Minister Anami, the very individual who had articulated such evocative, almost lyrical sentiments concerning the nation's potential annihilation, now presented himself before his esteemed colleagues, his voice heavy with the profound burden of utter vanquishment. "A single atomic bomb," he recited from the somber interrogation dossier, "possessed the capability to obliterate 6 square miles, a destructive power equivalent to that wielded by 2,000 B-29 aircraft, each laden with 300 conventional bombs. The Americans ostensibly possess 100 such atomic weapons. They are reportedly capable of deploying 3 daily. The impending target could very possibly be Tokyo." An oppressive silence enveloped the chamber, punctuated solely by the audible, strained respirations of Admiral Suzuki. These were individuals who had exercised command over millions of combatants, meticulously planning and executing vast military campaigns throughout the expansive Pacific theater. Men who had, until this moment, been strangers to the experience of defeat. Yet they now confronted a weapon of such unparalleled destructive magnitude that it rendered their accumulated military acumen as antiquated and ineffectual as ancient samurai blades in an era dominated by rapid-fire machine guns. Astonishingly, despite this dire realization, their deliberations remained stalemated. Astonishingly, the highest echelons of power remained in an intractable deadlock. A critical 3 votes had been cast in favor of capitulation, while an equal number adamantly insisted on prosecuting the war further, even in the face of cataclysmic nuclear destruction. Such an unprecedented division within the leadership would necessitate an intervention heretofore unseen in the annals of Japanese history to shatter the profound impasse. Just prior to the stroke of midnight on August 9, 1945, an extraordinary event transpired, one that had not manifested itself in over a millennium of the nation's recorded past. Emperor Hirohito, revered as a divine sovereign who traditionally transcended mundane political affairs, made his solemn entrance into a conference room, personally stepping in to resolve the deep governmental gridlock that threatened to tear the nation apart. The scene itself was a tableau of unparalleled and almost dreamlike quality. The 6 distinguished members of the Supreme War Council, alongside the venerable Baron Kiichiro Hiranuma, assumed reverent kneeling postures around a gleaming, polished table. The emperor, though of modest physical build, carried the immense gravitas of his sacred mandate. He uttered pronouncements destined to terminate not merely a brutal global conflict, but an entire way of thinking about the very essence of armed confrontation. "I have given serious consideration to the situation at home and abroad," Hirohito declared, his voice a hushed murmur barely audible in the tense silence. "We must bear the unbearable and suffer what is insufferable. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic." In that profoundly pivotal moment, Japan's preeminent military leaders found themselves confronted with a momentous decision, a stark dichotomy between upholding national dignity and ensuring existential preservation. Some, like the pragmatic Prime Minister Suzuki, conceded to the emergent grim circumstances and accepted the new reality. Others, however, such as the resolute General Anami, elected an entirely alternative course of action, unable to reconcile with the shifting tides of destiny. On August 15th, mere hours before the Emperor's historic broadcast announcing Japan's surrender, General Anami performed the solemn rite of ritual seppuku within the confines of his own home. He concluded his existence in alignment with his lifelong principles, adhering strictly to the ancient warrior's code, a code that the advent of atomic weaponry had ironically rendered utterly irrelevant and tragically antiquated. His valedictory verse, inscribed in his own blood, articulated profound fealty to the emperor and lamented his inability to continue his service. To his dying breath, he remained oblivious to the fact that the world had fundamentally and irrevocably transformed around him. Yet, perhaps the figure imbued with the most profound pathos was Admiral Toyota, who had, with unwavering conviction, asserted that the Americans lacked the capacity for a substantial nuclear arsenal. His confident pronouncements would later stand in stark contrast to the devastating truth. Following the cessation of hostilities, when the entire magnitude of the clandestine Manhattan Project was finally unveiled, and when he came to understand that the immense productive prowess of the United States had achieved what Japanese scientists had deemed unattainable, Toyota was said to have devoted many hours gazing intently at photographs depicting the utter desolation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, doing so in complete stillness and profound introspection. The atomic bombings transcended the mere conclusion of World War II. They signaled the demise of a comprehensive strategic doctrine, an entire military philosophy rooted in concepts of martial integrity, ultimate self-abnegation, and traditional combat methodologies. Contemporary strategic thinkers now analyze this historical episode not just as a fragment of the past, but as a cautionary tale concerning the perils of intellectual myopia in leadership, how specialized proficiency can ironically constrain perception, and how professional knowledge can, paradoxically, obstruct the acknowledgement of paradigm-shifting transformations. Today, as we confront our own epochs of transformative technological advancement, encompassing fields such as artificial intelligence, sophisticated cyber warfare, and the burgeoning capabilities of space-based weapons, the narrative of Japan's military leadership in August 1945 remains poignantly pertinent. It serves as a stark reminder that the most profound military calamities frequently arise not from adversarial forces beyond one's borders, but from an intrinsic incapacity within to adjust to emergent circumstances. The Japanese military were unable to credit the catastrophic potency of the American atomic weapon precisely because they had self-assuredly concluded its realization was beyond the realm of possibility. Their accumulated scientific acumen, their specialized vocational mastery, their inherent societal assurance, all paradoxically transformed into instruments of their own undoing. Sometimes the gravest adversary can be the unwavering conviction that one fully comprehends the operational parameters of a given conflict, even as another party has irrevocably altered those fundamental tenets forever.